Hi everyone, I am Chris, this is Simply Classic, and we have a new pattern, newish pattern for you today. Now this is a pattern a lot of you have already made, but it has been requested that I actually write a physical pattern for it, so that's what we've done. But today we are releasing the Rosanne. Now, again, this has been a cutting chart pattern on the website, and so many of you have already made this bag and you do an amazing job with it. The pattern is now available so that if you have a shop and you would like to teach the class, you can do that. And we should have print versions of it shortly, so we're super excited about that. But let's go over a couple features of the Rosanne. So I have a tassel here that I've attached. You certainly don't have to do that. That's not in the pattern. It's just something a little extra if you want to add it. But basically it is a bag that has some faux rolled handles, which we will do in today's video. It has a flap closure, which here you can use whatever kind of hardware you'd like. So I have a snap tab here. Here I also have a snap tab. We're going to use a twist lock today, and this is really an opportunity for you to get creative with hardware. You will see when you look at the pattern that there are some testers that really did amazing things with this, and they embellished with it. And so again, a pattern is a suggestion. This is the base. Y'all take it and run with it and get creative. So we have two different closures on the top of the bag written into this pattern. The first is the snap closure, and the snap closure is it was done because that's what the original pattern had. Okay, so that's what the inspiration bag had, was two snaps at the top of this bag. So we're going to do that today. However, if you prefer to have a zipper closure, we do have a video where I made this bag and there is a zipper closure on top. So I will open this up and you will see that it has this zipper closure. Now, the main thing you need to remember if you want the zipper closure is that when you, and I will go over this again when we sit down and look at the bag, but when you go to stitch the final top stitch onto where you're putting the zipper placket in between your upper lining and your lower lining, typically when you top stitch this zipper placket down, okay? Not in this bag. You have to top stitch it up. If you don't top stitch it up, you're gonna have a problem with the zipper placket fitting in the bag. And the reason why is because this bag is angled and you've got a wider part, the upper part of this bag is wider than just an inch or two below it. So it's going to cause the zipper to buckle. So just make sure that you top stitch that placket up, and then you will get a really nice looking zipper like this. Okay, so we are going to do it today out of some of the spheres fabric that I have, and we're going to go ahead and get started by going over pattern pieces. Let's go over pattern pieces. So we have two handles, and the handles, you're going to cut two pieces. They're a little bit thinner than normal handles. Make sure you look at the cutting chart. I went ahead and put double-sided tape down the center. Usually I put two pieces on either side of the line, but this time I put it down the center. And in the end, this is what our handle is going to look like. Okay, so we are going to do this faux rolled handle. The rivets are optional, you don't have to do that. And as you can see, I have one completed, and then we will go ahead and complete the other one in the video. I have one piece for strap connectors, and basically, or handle connectors, I should say. You can cut one big piece, which I'm going to do here. That's what the pattern's written for. And then we're going to cut, once we sew it, we'll cut it down into the 4 handle connectors that we need. We have a flap piece, and the way you're going to do this flap piece is you're going to cut one using the pattern piece. You're going to put some Decoville light on the back, and then you're going to cut another piece, and this is just going to be a square, okay? Or rather a rectangle, not a square. But we're going to end up putting these together, wrong sides together, and we're going to stitch around, and then we're going to cut it down so that our edges are nice and even, okay? So on your flap, you've got one piece cut to measurement with the Decoville, and then one square piece, or rectangle piece, gosh. Okay, we have an overlay piece. This is the front of the bag, this overlay. We have front and back, and they're the same piece, okay, front and back. Same size. Now, Decoville light does not go to the bottom. And we're going to put the Decoville heavy, which I cut, on after we sew the bottom seam. So you have two pieces. You want to make sure that they are about 1/4 inch from the top on each one, because we're going to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance to sew this upper seam because there is a curve. I usually like to take a little bit less of the seam allowance when we have a curved edge. It's a little bit easier to sew. Okay, so we have two pieces, one for front, one for back. We have two side pieces, and the side pieces, the Decoville light goes all the way to the bottom. You will see here that we have little cutouts. So you want to go ahead and make sure you do those. And easy enough. Okay, we have, of course, I said our Decoville heavy. Go ahead and have that cut and ready to go. For the lining, we have, of course, our zipper overlay. We have our slip pocket accent. We have our, of course, our zipper. We have a slip pocket, which I am using the Tilda fabric, and this is the dark gray chambray. It goes amazing with this blue spheres fabric. It's just gorgeous. It's like they were made for each other. So that's our slip pocket. And then of course we have a couple of zipper pocket pieces as well. We have two lining pieces, again with woven interfacing on the back. And of course we have two of them. And then we have our two upper lining pieces. And these also have Decoville light on the back. These are kind of hard to hold. Okay. And they are 1/4 inch from the top and really all the way around. Okay, the Decoville light centered. For hardware, we're going to need rectangle rings. We're going to need a couple of magnetic snaps now, and then some kind of closure. If you want to do the zipper placket, you're also going to have two zipper placket pieces and two zipper placket lining pieces, and then of course a large zipper for the top. And I'm going to refer you again back to the video where I made the green Rosanne, and that video specifically to show you how to put that zipper placket in and how to create it. Okay, so without further ado, let's get started. Step one, we're going to do our handles and our handle connectors. And again, this is what our final handle is going to look like. So you see we have the handles pinched in. We have part of this folded back that's pinched in and sewn right on top, so it holds it all together. If you do not have an industrial machine, there is some thickness here, okay, but it's 4 layers. So if you're used to doing handles and it normally handles 4 layers, you should be okay. If you have a little bit of a problem with that, you might want to just do a traditional handle and you might be a little bit better off. But overall, it's really a pretty thin handle, and so in the end, it may end up being better. So we're going to start with the handle connectors first, and I have my piece here that I already drew a line down the center, and I put double-sided tape along the back. I'm just going to fold this into the center. And since this is a handle connector, I want my 2 long edges to match in the center. I'm going to butt them right up against each other. And then we are going to stitch down each side using an 1/8 inch seam allowance, and then we'll cut 4 connectors out of this piece. Once the connector piece is sewn, all you're going to do is fold it in half. Go ahead and cut it. You're going to fold each one of these pieces in half again and cut it. And now we have our 4 handle connectors. Okay, easy enough. Let's set these aside for just a minute and talk about our other handle. Now, you're going to want to draw a line down the center, just like you normally do. And I usually put 2 pieces of 1/4-inch double-sided tape on each side of the line. For this kind of handle, I decided to put 1 piece of 1/2 inch. It's going to work out better. The other thing you want to do is you're going to draw a line from the short edge over, and I give you the measurement in the pattern. Draw that line. And then you're also going to draw lines up to, this is a vertical line, you're going to draw horizontal lines up to that original line you drew. Okay? Then from here, you're going to take a pair of scissors and you're going to cut along the horizontal line, and right at the top where the vertical line is, you're just going to veer off. And you're going to do that on both sides. And this doesn't have to be exactly perfect and even here. As long as it's close, it's fine. Okay? I'm going to do that on the other side as well. Okay, and there we have our indentation. And you can see these aren't exactly matched up. Again, it's fine, no problem. So we're going to remove the backing off the tape. And let me say too that, when it comes to handles, the pattern has a specific size handles, but you can make these handles as long or as short as you want. So, as I always say, a pattern is a suggestion. You make it your own. So I'm going to fold these in. And then when I get to the end, I want to fold this edge into the center. Okay, so I cut this edge, but I still want to fold it all the way to the center. And when you do that, you're going to have this little bubble that forms because you're going from a wider edge to a narrower edge. Just stick your tip of your scissors in there. And you don't want to cut it all the way to the edge of the strap. You just want to cut it so that you can make it lay flat. Okay, just relieve that little bubble. So we're going to keep on. And again, when I get here to this other side, I'm going to take this edge and bring it all the way to the center. My little bubble's going to be created. I'm going to stick my scissors in there, just clip it, and push it down. And then we're going to repeat on the other side. Now, in the center of this handle, I do want to try to leave a little bit of a space because we are going to be folding again. But on these short edges, I want the long edges to meet. Okay, so right here, the long edges are meeting, but over here, I have a little bit of a space between the long edges. So we're just going to continue folding. Make these edges meet. And then let's go ahead and clip our bubble. Okay. So from here, I'm going to take a little piece of double-sided tape and put it right along this narrow edge. Okay, do the same thing on this side, and this is just 1/4-inch double-sided tape. Just use what you have. Okay, take your 2 rectangle rings. You're going to remove the tape. You're going to put the rectangle ring right where it goes from narrow to wider, right at that point. And just fold this up. And what you're going to have is a strap where this narrow section is hidden behind the wider section, and that's what we want. Because when we fold this again, we don't want any of this narrow section peeking out. So we're going to do this one more time on this side. Okay, and then from here, we're going to fold this strap over again. And that's what's going to give us our faux rolled look. And then I'm going to clip. Now, when you get to this point here, you want to make sure that when you fold, when you sew, you're going to capture part of this short section to secure it. So I'm going to go ahead and fold this over and clip it so that I get that kind of almost pleat look right there. But I want to capture the narrow section as well. If I don't, then my handle is not going to be secure, and when I go to pick up my bag, it's just going to probably fall off, which we don't want. So I'm going to go ahead and clip all the way down. And then when I get to the other side, I'm going to do the same thing. Make sure that when I fold this, I'm capturing some of that narrow section in the fold. Okay. So here's what we have. So from here, I want to go ahead and stitch this, making sure that I start far enough in, or far enough to the edge, close enough to the edge, that I capture that little short section. So I'm going to stick my needle in. Well, maybe. There we go. And I'm just going to stitch 1/8 of an inch from the edge. Now, I do want to do a little bit of a back stitch here because number one is black, you're not going to be able to tell. And it's going to, I mean, this is kind of how we're securing our bag, you know, securing the handles on. So if I just tie a knot, I don't really feel like it's going to be secure enough. So I'm going to just do a little back stitch. Come back and then continue forward. Okay, when I get to the other side, again, I want to make sure I stitch far enough, capture that narrow section, do a little back stitch. So you can see here how that narrow section has been captured. Okay, and if you feel like you didn't get close enough, usually the side I start at, I I can't get quite as close as the side I stitched to. So you can certainly go back and do a little bit of extra stitching if you feel like you need that. I'm going to do a little bit more over here. All right, I think that will stay just fine. So from here, if you would like, this is not required, but you can put rivets here on this section. It looks fine without, but if you do want to put a rivet, go ahead and measure up so that they're even from the fold. I like to go ahead and put a dot. And then you can go ahead and punch and set some rivets. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and install a couple rivets and we'll move on. All right, the last step in the handle construction is to go ahead and attach the strap connectors. So go put them on the opposite sides of the rectangle rings, or if you decide to use O-rings, I mean, you can certainly use whatever you would like here. So go ahead and put them on. And then I'm just going to baste each one of these closed. And I say baste, really, I'm sewing them closed, the very edge here. Now we are not going to cut these down once we baste them onto the front of the bag. They're going to stay this long, just to kind of give the bag a little extra support in the handles. Last but not least, so our handles are now complete. We're going to go ahead and set those aside, and we're going to move on to step 2, which is our exterior. So the first thing that I want to do is work on my flap. So take your 2 flat pieces and some double-sided tape, or you can glue this, whatever you prefer. And I'm just going to place this on. Now, if you are using a snap for your attachment, you want to take your pattern piece, mark your snap placement, and attach the male part of your snap. I'm going to use a twist lock, so I'm not going to need to do that, but just keep that in mind. Don't forget to use or to install that snap if you have it. And I'm going to put a little extra on here because I want to make sure my sides are together. Okay, so take the double-sided tape off, or again, you can use glue here, and then we're going to put these 2 pieces wrong sides together. Okay, from the side that's been cut out, go ahead and stitch anywhere between 1/4 and 1/8 of an inch, and then we can go back and trim the edge, make sure all the edges are even. I like to take a little bit larger seam allowance so I can trim this top piece if I need to. So around these curves, I'm going to go ahead and take a couple hand stitches. And then you also want to stitch across the top. So from here you can take a sharp pair of scissors or a rotary cutter and a ruler and go ahead and cut this piece down. So you want the edges to be nice and even. And if you would like, you can use some base coat and edge paint to edge paint this. It is up to you. Since I am using black and the back of the black is black, I'm not going to base coat because you're not really going to be able to see it. I'm going to take a little bit more off on this side. Okay, and there is the flap. Good to go. So from here, we want to go ahead and take our front piece. If you have one front that is, or two pieces that are different, and one is the front and one is the back, you want to take your front piece. And we are going to go ahead and put this overlay on. So the first thing I want to do is make sure it's centered. So I'm going to find the center of the overlay and the center of the front. Now we don't have any kind of stabilizer or anything on this overlay piece. It's really more just of a decorative piece. Okay. So from here, I'm going to put some double-sided tape, or again, you can use glue, whichever you prefer, on this piece. And then we're going to peel the backing off the tape and lay it right on top of that front piece, matching the centers. I'm going to start here. Got a little tuck in my overlay. Make sure it's laying nice and flat. Okay, so now we are going to stitch this on using 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. And again, because I'm using black and the back of the black is black, I did not edge coat. However, you could certainly base and edge coat this overlay piece before you put it onto this bag. So we're just going to do 1/8 of an inch and stitch all the way around. And then in the corners, I am going to take some hand stitches so I can make sure everything looks really nice. I am going to stitch across the bottom. And then come back up the other side. And I'm also going to stitch across this top section because when I stitch everything together, I don't want to have any problems with it gapping right here and not catching the top. So there's our overlay. Got a little extra down here at the bottom. I'm just going to cut that off. From here, you want to go ahead and mark the placement of your snap. So go ahead and lay your piece down. Go ahead and mark the placement. And then attach whatever you're using, whatever piece you're using to this bottom section. So it might be a snap tab. I'm going to be using this twist lock. Whatever it may be. The other thing is that if you would like to add a bag tag, you're going to want to add it at this point. And this is going to end up being part of the bottom. So don't put it too close to the bottom here. I give you a suggestion in the pattern as to how far up to place it. So I'm just going to make a little mark here. And you see it almost looks like the center, but it won't be. So I'm going to go ahead and install both my bag tag and my twist, part of my twist lock, and then we will continue. Both have been installed, and I now have, or I also put some double-sided tape on the back. You can use duct tape or whatever you like to use to protect your lining. We are now going to take our back piece and we're going to put these right sides together and clip the bottom. Okay, we're going to stitch. Open this up and you want to kind of finger press this down, and we are now going to top stitch this seam open. So the seam is top stitched, and what that does is it's going to hold this nice and flat, because we now need to put our deckable heavy right here in between. Now when we put this on, we want to make sure we leave a small space between our Decaville heavy and our Decaville light, so that when we turn this back and we lift this up, we have a nice crisp edge here in the front. Okay, so you're just going to position it so it's about 1/8 of an inch away on each side. That's all you need. And then it's going to be about 1/2 inch away on these short sides. So I'm going to go to the iron. I'm going to go ahead and fuse this down, and then we will return. I have my Decaville heavy on. And if you want purse feet, I give you measurements in the pattern as to how to mark for those purse feet. There are 4 purse feet on this bag. I had a couple of my testers add 6. They put 1 more here, even with these lines. And I think that's actually a pretty good idea. You don't want to, or you really want to avoid putting one in the center because of the seam. I think your seam's going to come undone, and we certainly don't want that to happen. So you can either put 4 or 6 feet. You're going to measure in from each side of the decaville and then measure over on each horizontally here from the decaville. I think that just for fun, I am going to just go ahead and add 6. Why not? I have 6 available, and so I'm just going to continue my line and add that 6th foot, or the 6 feet. I'm just going to continue this on. And then in the center of this, let's see. So the center should be right about here. Okay. So off camera, I'm going to go ahead and install my purse feet, and obviously there are several different kinds of feet. I usually just use these have been the most successful for me. We do have some screw-ins coming in. They should be here hopefully in the next couple weeks, but until then I'm just going to use my good old-fashioned tong, I guess you could call these, feet. So I'll get these on and we'll come back. If your stabilizer is not sticking very well, you can stitch around the stabilizer before you put your feet on, and that's just going to give it like a nice decorative look at the bottom. So feel free to do that if you feel like you want a little extra support. Mine stuck fine, so I just went ahead and added my feet, and I'm going to put a little bit of double-sided tape over those. Not only does it help protect the lining, but I also feel like it helps keep the feet on. I have had situations where I've had to take these feet or something off that I put double-sided tape behind, some kind of piece of hardware, and it can be very tough. So it's kind of a little extra security holding everything in place. Okay. So from here, we are ready to put our sides on. So you're going to find the center of the bottom of your side. Now the bottom is the narrower end, okay? So find the center. And I'm going to place the center right on the seam. And I'm going to repeat for the other side. Okay, so from here we want to stitch these sides on, and we're just going to stitch at the bottom first. So from this little cutout right here, the edge of this cutout, all the way to the edge of the other cutout is where we're going to sew. From here, we want to go ahead and clip right next to this side. So this little square that we have right here on the side piece, we're going to clip up the side of it. And we're going to clip to our stitch line. Okay, so you can see here how that's cut. You do the same thing on this side. Okay, then from here, we're going to match the top of the side with the top of the front and or back. and you're going to come all the way down the side, and you're going to see that that clip you made is going to be perfect and everything's going to match up. So you're going to go ahead and get all of this on, and then we're going to clip this side. So just turn the bag, and by making that clip, it's allowing this main piece to make that turn. Okay, so we're going to stitch, and when we stitch, we're going to stitch right off this edge here. So we're going to come down, and then when we stitch, just come right off. So you're basically stitching to this point where this corner is. And the same thing here. Now on this side, this is where we're going to start, but we're going to start right here at this point, at this little corner, and then we're going to go all the way up, or vice versa, however we're going to do this. I guess I'm going to start over here on this one. Now, if you need to kind of fold the bottom out of the way, because as you put this in your machine, you're going to see this is going to want to be in the way right here. Just take and you can just fold this down out of the way, okay, and then go ahead and stitch. So as I stitch down, I'm going to fold the bottom out of the way so I can stitch right off this edge. And that's one side completed. So I'm going to repeat that same process for the other side to get it sewn on, and then we'll continue. Now that we have the bag sewn, I'm going to go ahead and cut back the seam allowance down here at the bottom. I'm going to cut back the seam allowances on the side, but I'm going to leave the full seam allowance here at the top because I want to be able to open the seam when I stitch the top to the lining, or the exterior to the lining. So just going to, and you know, about an inch or so from the top, go ahead and just veer off. Okay, and then from here, go ahead and turn the bag. And now our exterior is completed. So I'm going to give this a quick iron, use my small iron, and go ahead and just kind of make sure it all looks nice and unwrinkled, and then we're going to start with the lining. Step 3 in the pattern is the zipper overlay, and I just want to explain one more time what you need to do if you decide to do the zipper overlay. So you're going to, and again, I'm going to refer you back to this video on how to complete this overlay piece. But if you've done any of my other patterns, you know, whether it be the Julie, the Bircham, the Leah, Little Leah, all of those have these zipper overlays. They're all done exactly the same way. But because this bag is wider at the top than it is, you know, even just a couple inches down, you need to make sure your overlay is in the up position when you top stitch. So you can see here how this overlay is facing the top of the bag. When you go to do your top stitch, and you can see here that my top stitch, instead of having this overlay piece down and top stitching, sorry, this keep moving on me, top stitching here like we normally would, I'm actually lifting the zipper placket up and top stitching it in the up position, okay? So just make sure that you do that, and then you will be good to go. And it'll fit nicely. So step 3, again, is the zipper placket. We are not going to do that step. Refer you back to that video for that, okay? All right, so we're going to move on to the lining though, and the first thing that I want to do with my lining is to go ahead and do my pockets. So I have my slip pocket. I'm going to fold so that there's right sides together, put a couple clips, and we're going to stitch. Okay, we're going to do the old pocket turn trick where we fold the seam allowance down, hold it, and then turn. So we get a nice corner on our pocket without having to cut anything. And then I'm going to take my turning tool and just poke the rest of that out. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and baste this top closed. And then I'm going to take my accent piece, put some double-sided tape on both sides of it, or you can clip, whichever you prefer. And then we're going to center the top of the pocket right in the center of this overlay. Fold this down over the top of the pocket. And then we're going to stitch. And then from here you can go ahead and clip the sides off so it's even with the pocket. And then we have our slip pocket completed. So for our zipper pocket, we're going to, you can do this a couple different ways. You can clip your zipper, or you can use a little bit of double-sided tape. I like the double-sided tape. I feel like it maybe helps the zipper stay in place a little bit better, because sometimes as your teeth bump your presser foot, it can kind of shift. So I'm just going to put a couple of pieces of double-sided tape at the top of my pockets. Go ahead and peel the backing off. Place this right on top. And then we're going to stitch. So from here, open this up. You're going to make sure your seam allowance is facing the pocket. So basically your zipper tape is laying flat, and we're going to top stitch. We're going to repeat that process for the other pocket piece. Put the wrong side of our zipper against the right side of our pocket. And stitch. And then we're going to open this up and make sure that that zipper tape is laying flat, so the seam allowance is going towards the pocket piece. We're going to stitch. So from here, we're going to add our zipper pull. You do want to make sure that the ends of the zipper are not going to fray. And then I'm going to put some 1/4 inch double-sided tape right along the edge of the zipper tape. And then we're going to set this aside. Move on to constructing our key fob. So on the key fob piece, I'm going to put some double-sided tape along one edge. And then go ahead and pinch the two long edges together. Now, if your machine doesn't like double-sided tape, you see all these times I'm using it, you can certainly clip instead. You do not have to use double-sided tape. It's whatever you prefer. I'm just going to match these up as best I can, but I'm not going to worry too much if they're not exact, because we're going to trim this down. We're going to stitch using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And then I'm going to take this to my table, and using a rotary cutter and a ruler, I'm going to cut the seam allowance back to 1/8 of an inch. Now that this is cut back, you're going to put a swivel clasp. Go ahead and fold that over. Punch a hole and then set a rivet, or you can stitch, whichever you prefer. You don't have to put a rivet here. Now, I just happen to be out of gunmetal 1/2 inch swivel clasps They should be here this week. So I'm going to improvise with the nickel and then I'll just switch it out. So I made my key fob a little bit longer than normal so that when I clip this off and refold it with the new swivel clasp, it will still be long enough. Now the key fob is complete. So let's go ahead and find the center of our lining pieces. So I've got both of them here together. I'm just gonna go ahead and clip the top and the bottom. And then we're going to take one of these pieces. Let me move all this aside. Let's start with our slip pocket. We're going to go ahead and center our slip pocket. And I give you the measurements as far as how far away from the top to be. Move it up just a hair. I have my Sew Tight magnets here that I'm using to hold this pocket on. And if you look in the link below, you will see where we have a discount code for you to purchase these. Okay, we're going to go ahead and stitch all the way around the three open sides. And there we have our slip pocket. Now if you'd like, you can go ahead and put rivets here at the top, which I like to do because slip pockets have a lot of, you know, we get in and out of them a lot, right? Especially if it's for our cell phone. So I just think it adds a little extra stability. And whenever I put a slip pocket, or excuse me, whenever I put a rivet on a slip pocket, I always make sure I put a little bit of Decaville Heavy or a piece of leather, something behind the rivet so that it does not pull through the lining. So in my case right now, I have some Decaville Heavy here. I'm just going to use that. So just cut a hole and then place it through. And then I will set these, and then we'll be able to put our zipper pocket in. So there's the slip pocket completed. We want to take the other side of our lining and our zipper overlay. I'm going to put some double-sided tape along each side. And then I'm going to center it. On the top of this zipper, or on the top of this lining. I want to make sure that I'm putting it the right distance from the top here. Looks like it's slightly crooked, so let me fix that. Okay, and then from here, we're going to go ahead and stitch around the outside of this rectangle. You can either backstitch or pull your threads through, whichever you prefer. Just pull those threads through, tie a knot. So here in the back, I'm just going to pull this bobbin thread up. And then tie these off. Now you can either burn this edge or you can put a little bit of double-sided tape to hold it down, just to make sure it doesn't come unraveled. My double-sided tape is not wanting to behave here. There we go. Okay. So from here, we're going to cut the center out of this zipper pocket piece. And there is no reason to be neat about it from the back. And on the front, it's going to look so pretty. So we're going to take our pocket, peel the backing off the double-sided tape, and go ahead and center it in the zipper opening. And not only do you want to center it top to bottom, you also want to center it side to side. And then we're going to stitch around the small rectangle. And I'm going to pull my threads through to the back like I did the first round. I will tie them off, and since this is going to be on the inside of my pocket, I don't want to put double-sided tape. So what I will do is, because it's a bonded nylon thread, you can burn it, kind of singe the edge. So that's what I'm going to do as soon as I can pick this thread up. There we go. So I'm going to tie my knot, go ahead and clip this off, and then very carefully go ahead and singe the edge. Okay, from here, you want to take the top pocket, so basically the upper pocket, and go ahead and fold it down towards the lower pocket. We're going to put a couple clips in here, and then we're going to cut this bottom section off. So whenever you do a pocket like this, you're always going to have some extra zipper, and it's going to be about 1 1/4 inches roughly. Basically the width of your zipper tape. So now that we've cut that off, turn this around, pull the lining back from the zipper, and then go ahead and stitch down and back stitch really well. We're not going to stitch the bottom of this pocket closed just yet. We'll leave it open for turning. And then we're going to do the same thing on the other side. Go ahead and stitch. And then our zipper pocket is complete. So if you were doing the zipper placket, at this point, you want to go ahead and center your zipper placket pieces on your lining. I always like to make sure my zippers are closing in the same direction. So you would put, or what I would do is put the zipper that's closing, or put the placket so it's closing to the left on this side, and then the other one on this side. You're going to put the wrong side of the placket against the right side of this lining, and then you will end up putting this on top and sandwiching the upper lining over the zipper placket. So your zipper placket will be between your lower lining and your upper lining. But before we sew this upper lining on, since we're not using the zipper placket method, I'm going to take my pattern piece and I'm going to mark the placement of my my magnetic snaps. Geez, sorry. Had a moment there. Okay, so I'm going to do that on both of them. And then I'm going to install the snaps. Now what you want to make sure of is that both male ends, because you have two snaps here, both male ends are on the same piece and both female ends are on the same piece. So I'm just going to put, say, the female on here, 2 females, and then 2 males. So I'm going to go ahead and get those magnetic snaps put on, and then we will return. So I have female ends on one, male ends on the other. I'm going to put a little bit of double-sided tape here on the back. Again, just to protect anything from rubbing against it, and also to give it a little extra hang on so it doesn't pull out. All right, so from here we are going to take one of our lining pieces. We're going to clip the upper lining to the lower lining. Now this is going to be a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And you can see pretty much where that is and how that works just from where the stabilizer was put on. So we're going to stitch, and then on one of these you want to go ahead and, it doesn't matter which side, slip your key fob in. Let me do that right now before I forget, because I am really good about forgetting the key fob. I'm going to cut off this extra key fob, made it super long. And then we're going to just turn this and top stitch. And because it is a 1/4 inch seam allowance, it's a little bit tough to top stitch, but just make sure it's laying flat and it'll be all right. And we are top stitching on the upper lining. And then we're going to repeat for the other side. I'll go ahead and do that and then we'll come back. We now have both lining pieces completed. I'm going to snap my snaps together and the side should line up. So you want to make sure, especially that these upper lining sides match perfectly. That's the most important part. Go ahead and clip that. And do the same thing on the other side. And then we're going to go ahead and stitch. Now, whenever I do upper lining like this, I always start at the upper lining place, like right here where I want this to match exactly correct. Start there, go up, backwards, and then come back and turn, come back and complete the seam. But if you start up here, between here and here, it could slip. So I always start here, go backwards, and then come back. Once you put your needle in, it's not going anywhere. We're going to leave the bottom open for turning, and then I want to go ahead and just clip these off, these seam allowances. I'm going to go past the bulk of the upper seam, and then I'm going to veer off. Leave this so that you can open and stitch this without a problem. If the seam allowance is too small, you can't open it and you end up almost with more bulk than less. Okay, and now these will open nicely. All right, we want to move on to the last step, which is the final assembly. And we are going to start out by, I have a tip in the pattern to baste the handles on first, so we're going to do that. I want to make sure that you see how to do that and you know the exact placement of it. In the pattern, I kind of do it all together, but I think that it's going to be better if we do it separate. So you want to make sure that, first of all, your handle is not twisted in any way, okay? And we're going to lay it so the right side of the handle, okay, so obviously these handles have a right and wrong side, is, and I give you a distance here, you're going to measure from this seam, so it's going to be your side seam essentially. You're going to measure over and you're going to clip the adjuster. Now you want to have a little bit hanging off. Again, we're not going to cut this back. We want to keep it long, because if we trim it afterwards, it's going to lose a little bit of integrity, and we certainly don't want to do that. So I am going to do the same thing over here. And then I'm going to check my measurements and just make sure that it is the right distance. So check that. Okay, this one's correct, this one is not. Let me move it over a little bit. And so from here, you can go ahead and put the other one on and then stitch your upper lining to your exterior of your bag with these in all at one time. Or, and look at me, I have my, look at this is flipped. You see this? This is the right side, this is the wrong side. Somehow this got flipped as I was talking. So let me flip it back. That's what you want to make sure of doesn't happen, obviously. Okay, much better. So anyway, as I was saying, you can do this all in one, or you can baste this in place. So just for ease of showing you how to do it in the placement, I'm going to go ahead and baste this in place. So I'm just going to turn it around. I do want to make sure that the handle is straight. And then I'm just going to, from the inside, baste it. And it's going to stay in the seam allowance. And I say baste, I mean really I'm going to sew it in. I'm going to repeat for the other side. Make sure it's nice and straight. And then just go ahead and stitch it in. And then that's just less I have to worry about when I'm stitching my top and my lining together. So we have the front basted on. I'm going to go ahead and do exactly the same thing for the back. And one of the things you can do is you can measure, or you can just line this up, line your seams up, line your handles up. And that way, even if your placement is off a little bit, at least they're even from front to back, if that makes sense. If they're wrong, you'd rather them both be wrong a little bit than to have one be right and one be wrong and it be crooked. That makes kind of crazy thought, but we lived one time in a house that, it was an old house. It was built like in the 1800s, and like the ceiling was crooked. It had beadboard walls and the ceiling was crooked. And whenever I go to hang something, I always had to hang it even with the lines in the wall and the ceiling. And a lot of times it was crooked, but it looked straight, because if I hung it straight, then it looked crooked. Yeah. So anyway, that's kind of the theory I'm going on with this. All right. So open up the seam allowance here and stitch. And do the same thing over here. Alright, so now our handles are basted on, and we can slip the main part of the bag inside the lining. Now, because this bag is angled, it's going to be a little bit tricky. I like to put slide it in from the top. Couple reasons. One, because your handles are now attached, right? So, you know, there's pluses and minuses to that, but you're going to have to stick them in here anyway at some point, so you might as well go ahead and baste them in. And then because the bottom is narrower, it can get a little bit tricky. My key fob's in there. Okay, and one other thing I forgot to mention is you do want to find the center of your sides. So I'm going to match my side seams here and just go ahead and find the center, because we want the side seam to match up with the center of the side. So this is another one of those bags, kind of like the Julie, kind of like the Fairhaven, where there's no intersecting seams, and that just makes the whole thing a lot easier with bulk. So if you tend to like the Julie and the Fairhaven and the Rosanne and you're not sure why, it may be for that reason. So see, you have a seam here from the upper lining, but you don't have a seam here. And so that's what makes the bag, sewing the bag in some ways easier, is the lack of bulk. And then here we have our front seam here, or side seam I should say, and there's no seam in the upper lining. So it just makes it really a good sew. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to clip this entire thing, and of course your upper lining and the top of your bag are the same shape, so it should fit together nicely. And then this is a big enough bag that you can easily stitch this on a flatbed, or you can stitch it on a cylinder arm, whichever you prefer. If you stitch it on a flatbed, stitch it from the inside. And then when you top stitch, you should not have a problem either, because the opening is wide. It's not a small opening, it's larger. So I'm going to take advantage of having the cylinder arm, and I'm going to mosey on over there to stitch this together, and then we will turn it and top stitch and kind of finish up the bag at the cylinder arm. So I'm going to finish clipping this and then meet you over there. So here we are at the cylinder arm. I'm going to go ahead and start stitching. And for this top, we are using a 1/4 inch seam allowance because it has a curve, and we want to make sure that just typically curves are better to stitch with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. You have a concave and a convex curve you're trying to put together, and 1/4 inch just works a whole lot better. So we're going to stitch around. We gotta turn the machine on first, that helps. So this is one of those things that might happen. My top or my front pulled away from the back just a tad, and right here at the, right here at the handle. Okay, so it's going to want to pull away. You want to make sure you keep an eye on it, and if it does, stop and then go back and restitch. And as long as you're stitching on the same line you had before, you'd be okay. You're not going to have any holes. So I just want to make sure I catch that underneath. Now that the top of the bag is stitched, in these curves here, we want to make sure that we put tiny little snips so that when we turn it, we're not going to have any kind of buckling or bulk. So I'm just going to cut little triangles in along the top. You don't have to do it everywhere, you just need to do it in the curves. And if you think you've done enough and you turn it and you have some bulk, then just go back and turn it again and recut. So you see here, I have little triangles that I've cut in there just to kind of give the fabric a place to go when we turn it. Do not cut back the little bit of extra you have here on your handles. You want to leave that, okay? So I'm going to go through, and on the other side, I'm going to make my little triangles, and then I'm going to turn the bag. So I have turned the bag and went around, clipped the top, made sure everything looked good, and now I'm going to top stitch. So when I top stitch, I certainly don't want to start here in the front. I'm going to start either on the side or in the back. And I'm just going to top stitch using the 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now that the top stitching's done, the last thing we have to do is to close up the bag and then add the flap. So I am going to, you can see here, the inside of the bag. I'm going to reach in and open up the zipper pocket, pull the lining out of the pocket, and I'm going to reach in the pocket and pull the bottom of the bag out through the pocket opening. Now I had previously marked the center, so I'm going to line up my centers, line up my edges, and clip. Okay, we're going to stitch the bottom. And then we need to box the bottom corners. So I'm going to cut back the seam allowance slightly on the bottom seam that I just took. And then to box the corners, you're just going to open up and match the seams. Now, usually I have one seam going in one direction and the other seam going in the other direction. It's called nesting seams. And then I just make sure that whatever position I put the bottom seam in on this side, I do the same thing on the other side. So I'm going to put a few clips in here. And then I'm going to do the same thing. Open up this seam allowance, and this is the bottom here, so I'm going to make sure that that seam is going in the same direction as the seam over here. Nest those seams together. And then I'm going to stitch. Cut this back. And then we're going to do the same thing on this side. And then go ahead and stuff the lining back in the bag. And now you have just the open zipper pocket to contend with. So go ahead and fold under the seam allowance by about a ½ inch, okay, to close that pocket, and clip it. And then we're going to stitch. go ahead and put the pocket back in, and we're going to go over to the main machine and finish up by putting the flap on. So here we have the bag so far. We need to go ahead and put that flap on. So what I suggest if you're using a twist lock is to go ahead and mark the placement of your twist lock. You have a spot on your pattern piece. You're going to mark that, and then you're going to mark the spot for the 3 rivets. Now, if you do not have rivets, or if rivets is just not possible for you, you can stitch this on. It's possible. You can certainly do that. So I'm going to mark that, and I'm going to mark the placement for this. And before you attach the flap, you want to go ahead and put the actual second part of your twist lock on. Because what we're going to do is we're going to put it on the bag, and then we're going to determine where we actually need to put the rivets. So I'm going to go ahead and punch my hole for my twist lock, punch my hole for my 3 rivets, and then we'll go ahead and finish up. So now that I have this on, I'm going to, and this is, when I say this, I mean the other side of the twist lock, I'm going to take my protective seal off of this side. And I'm going to go ahead and twist that on. And then take the flap and flip it to the back side. And then with a silver marking pen, go ahead and mark. I also punched my holes. Go ahead and mark the 3 holes here in the back. Make sure I can see these. And if you have a zipper placket, you really want to make sure that this, where you're punching your holes, is above where your zipper placket is. So what I mean by that is you can see here on this bag that the rivets are here on top of where the zipper placket meets the bag. Okay, so that's your goal there. If you don't have a zipper placket, it's not quite as important. Once I mark my holes, I'm going to go ahead and punch them. And then place my rivets. So again, if you do not have rivets, or rivets just isn't possible, then you can certainly sew this in place without a problem. So I'm going to set these rivets, and then we'll come back and take a look at the bag. And here we have the completed bag. So it is just a really beautiful bag, let's face it. It is, I guess you could say, after a designer for sure, because that's where we got the idea from. And the flap just makes it a little unique. You've got the overlay. You can just open this up. The lining, it's a little dark, hard to see, but the lining fits really nicely. And your Rosanne is complete. So I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. Whether you use the zipper placket or the snaps, either way, the Rosanne, and hope you enjoyed. And until next time, everybody, happy sewing.